and it failed. I know it will fail. It created the virtual network for you, which it did. But when it was creating the virtual network, there's sorry, when creating, let's say, the storage account, there is an internal server error which is telling, let's go back, and it's telling the response for the resource has invalid content and all that stuff. Just simply telling that, you know what, where is your ID out here? Like, you have given me something called as an ID, but that particular virtual network doesn't exist. Then where is the ID? How can I, go ahead and create something which is not there? How can I integrate your storage account with something that is not there out here? And the reason this is happening is because I am hard coding the ID out here. Now, do you get what is the issue in hard coding the ID out here? Because now, whenever you give this template to someone, they would like to create their own virtual network and their own subnet by passing the parameters. The reason you have parameters is for a reason. But here, if I hard code the ID, then I am making my template very static. I'm making my template telling that, you know what, this one should exist. That is the condition that I have. The same resource group, same ID should exist. If the ID is not there, the template is going to fail. Then how do I make my template more reusable? In this case, I'm passing the ID, template is getting static. My point here is that how do I get the ID while creation of the entire resource block? Concat and then say that it is like parameters, whatever is the name and all that stuff. Even you can do that. You can concat it, but if you concat it, you'll end up losing a couple of things. You will have to, let's say, concat subscriptions with something like your subscription ID. Again, subscription ID can be dynamic. This template can be deployed on any subscription, and that will become a problem for you. Again, if you, let's say, do a different ID out there, and then
Resource ID
you
of
have to
storage account.
resource ID of storage account. See, this is your storage account. I'm not worried about the resource ID of the storage account. I'm worried about the resource ID of the virtual network subnet. Storage account is not the issue. When storage account is getting integrated, that's the issue. If I remove this properties block, both of them will be created, not a problem. But I don't want both of them to be individually created. I want, let's say, storage account to be created with virtual network integration out there. Let me delete the resource group once again. Let me go into this particular resource group, and I have this particular, let's say, VNet created. I don't need this VNet. I'll just delete this out once again. So then how do I get the ID of this particular subnet that I'm creating? I'm sorry. Can you please come again with your point? Can we generate the subnet ID? Where do you want to generate the subnet ID? In subnet itself. Can you generate the ID? Yes, you can definitely generate the ID. You can generate the ID of the subnet on the fly. When I say on the fly, before even deploying your template, because before deploying your template, you don't have a subnet ID at all. But if you want to generate a subnet ID, let me take this out. And this is where I'm now coming down to dynamic functions. And the function that I want to call here is called a resource ID block. Resource ID of a particular, let's say, resource out here. So I'll say resource ID, and I'll just open the bracket. I want to generate the resource ID of what? Microsoft.virtual network forward slash what? The subnet. I'll say the subnet, comma, parameters VNet name. See here, you need a virtual network name and also a subnet name to generate the entire ID of it. I'll say parameters VNet name, comma, parameters subnet name. This is how I am not passing any ID and I am generating the IDs while I am creating this particular template. While I'm going ahead and creating this particular template out here, I'll just save. Now my question for everyone is that which resource do you think should be created first? Is it the storage account or is it the virtual network? Parallel in nature, correct. So both of them will get created parallelly. But my question is that if both of them get created parallelly, let's say the storage account is getting created first before the virtual network and the subnet, then don't you think this will fail? Because this particular block of storage account is dependent upon, let's say, the creation of a subnet, because it is looking for the ID of the subnet. So if I take this out directly the way it is, and if I go into, let's say, something like deploy a custom template again, I'll just save this out and I'll go here and create a new resource group called sample ARM, and I'll just pick up a region like ECS2. I'll say the VNet name is demo ARM VNet. This is demo ARM subnet, and the storage account name is demo ARM ABC BCD storage account. Some random name that is unique in nature. 000. Let me put something like this, and this is random in nature. I'm just going ahead and I'll say review and create. Template validation should pass. Template validation just checks whether that particular storage account name exists, whether the syntax is right and all that stuff. And if I now review and create this out, this will now go with a parallel creation. It will use a parallel logic. By default, ARM is a parallel logic. ARM is parallelly. And I'm creating two resources parallelly, but this is the catch. If I created both the resources parallelly, I don't have a control on the dependency of it. Meaning, it is quite evident from my template that the storage account creation will depend upon the existence of this particular resource ID called what? And subnet can only be created when you have the that's when you'll have a subnet and that's when you'll get an ID. That's when you'll have a subnet and that's when you'll get this particular ID out here. But in my case, what happened in my case is that firstly the VNet got created and then the storage account got created. In this case, I've also seen cases where the storage account first gets created and then the virtual network gets created. Now you do not have a control on what gets created first. Sometimes your, let's say, your sometimes your storage account request can be taken first and that can be created, and while that is created, it can throw errors telling that, you know what, I do not find that particular virtual network out here. Reason being, you're doing some kind of parallel creation out here. When one resource depends upon other, or when one resource here depends upon the other resource. In my case, storage account depends upon the creation of the virtual network itself. If that happens, you cannot do a parallel creation, or you should not do a parallel creation. Reason being, you don't have a control on which resource is getting created first. In this case, we were lucky because virtual network got created first, and then the storage account went ahead and got created second. But in some cases, your storage account can be created first, and while it is getting created, it'll kind of throw an error telling that, you know what, I did not get the resource ID of that particular virtual network because it's not there. Then you'll have to again take your template and redeploy it. That will become an issue. So in order to make sure that I don't leave it to a chance, in order to make sure that I don't leave it to a chance, I will go ahead, put one more additional block here in the storage account called depends on. I'll give a clause telling that the storage account depends upon the creation or the existence of the particular virtual network. Again, here I'll call the ID of that particular virtual network out here, comma, parameters vnet name. So I'm now giving one more clause out here telling that, what, this storage account should only be created if this particular virtual network is created. If it's not, then please don't create it. If it fails, then please don't provision a particular storage account. Reason being, the storage account here depends upon the ID of that particular subnet out there. So I'll just save this. And now if you look at this one, storage account is depending upon, let's say, a resource called, let's say, this particular virtual network. And now I'll take this resource block, or now I'll take the entire thing out here, go into the Azure portal, like an if else condition. Yes, if that exists, only then go ahead and create, else don't create it out completely. So I'll go into the resource groups again. This resource group is getting deleted. This one has a couple of resources. So let me go ahead and create one more resource telling, or let me do one thing. I'll just directly go into deploy a custom template. I'll say build your own template. I'll say this is a dummy RG CS2, and I'll say the VNet name is something called demo VNet ARM. Subnet name is subnet ARM. Storage account name is something like ARM store ACC 000 USEs2, like this. And I'll do a review and create. Again, the name doesn't seem to be exist. Yeah, now it's fine. I'll now review and create this out. And I'm now creating two resources which are dependent upon each other. And I'm using something known as a depends on clause while I'm creating it. So now I'm telling the storage account depends on the virtual network creation. So what ARM template will now do is that it won't create your resources in parallel. It won't leave it anything to chance. Now it happens so that your resource creation will happen in serial. So it will understand what are all the resources are. It will first try to resolve the dependency of the resources with each other, and will create all the resources that are not dependent upon each other parallelly, and all the resources that are dependent. Now, if you see, it first created the virtual network. It did not yet start the storage account creation. It said the virtual network is good, status is okay. After that, it's accepting the creation of your storage account out here. The reason being, I have a dependency clause between the storage account and the virtual network out there, because I don't want to leave something to chance. I don't want to say, okay, fine, what if my storage account gets created first? Then your storage account will fail. And after that, I have the particular resource created. Again, I'll have to refresh a couple of times to look at the storage account as well. And now I have a virtual network and a storage account. And if I go into my storage account, if I go into the networking of my storage account, I have this integrated with that particular subnet out here. Now you can take this template, give it to anyone. They can go and deploy anything out there of their own, let's say, names out there, and they can get a storage account and a virtual network integrated with each other as such. Yes, any questions still here that I can take? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here?
Yeah, Kiran, hello.
Good, please.
Yeah, actually, in outside exam will be there, right? Certification exam. Which type of questions we will get through network actually? Uh, Here completely depends upon ARM coding and all only is there, right? Any theory questions in the exam? I mean, certification
Very,
exam.
very less, I would say, in the certification exam. Theory is very less. They will not ask you what is a virtual network. It's not like that. If you look at the actual pattern of a certification exam out here, it'll be like, what, you have two companies out there. They have created two different virtual networks. How can you connect them? And then they have a couple of options out there. So it's a mix of, let's say, a practicality and a scenario based questions. So you have a lot of scenario based questions whenever you look at, let's say, the certification exam pattern out there.
Okay.
So it's completely scenarios. They'll give you a lot of scenarios out here, and you'll have to answer it based upon the scenarios as such. Yes, any more
Okay.
questions here?
So any sample questions, yeah, if possible.
I would say go through the Microsoft learning path. If you want to prepare for an exam, say AZ104, which is the Azure administrator, just scroll down and let's see, there's something called 2 ways to prepare online free. Just use these modules. This modules will itself have a lot of questions inside them that should give you a good amount of head start.
Okay.
Yes, you can do that. You can create virtual network and storage account in PowerShell as well. You can parameterize it. You can create stuff there as well.
I can.
You can do it in PowerShell, ARM, Bash, whatever it is. You can do that. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Uh, if there is a subnet number two also, how, is there any changes to deploy to subnets?
So if there is a subnet number two, all I need is to, let's say, go ahead add one more subnet out here. I'll say something like name, and inside the name, I will, let's say this is subnet 2, and then I have the properties of that particular subnet, and inside the properties I will give multiple properties, like let's say something like address prefix. And in the address prefix, the only change that you need to do is make sure that your subnet has a different ID out here, or a different IP address range out here, and you can go ahead and create the service endpoints and all that stuff. You can have multiple subnets inside the same block as such. How to, sorry, integrate multiple subnets into your storage account? This is an array, right? If I now say, sorry, if I now say ID, I will now take the resource ID of the second subnet. I'll say parameters vnet name, comma, subnet 2. Action is allowed. So you can have multiple subnets integrated in the same storage account. Also, you can go ahead and do a copy index for your storage if you want to create multiple storages integrated with the same virtual network out there. Yes, any more questions here? One storage account, multiple subnets, yes. Maximum of 100 subnets can be allowed there. Yes, any more questions here?
Sir, I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Go please.
Uh, This is in continuation to Ravi Shankar's question. Given the certifications, we have multiple of them. So, what would be the most relevant certification for our career?
So if you are aiming again, each and every certification is, let's say, giving you some kind of a career role out here. But if you are aiming for, let's say, Azure DevOps engineering, then you should aim at covering out AZ104. Or if you want to start with something very basic, you can go with AZ900, which is Azure Fundamentals, then 104, and then comes something known as AZ400. These are the three certifications that I would suggest if you are, let's say, looking at a career into Azure DevOps engineering out here.
Thank you, sir.
Certification is mandatory. Again, is it mandatory to get a job? No, not mandatory to get a job. Is it essential for you to, let's say, do some kind of a growth inside your job? Definitely yes. Because when they consider two people to promote something into a next position and etc., all these things comes into picture. That are you certified, and if you are, then what kind of certifications do you hold and all that stuff. Yes. Any more questions here?
Kiran, I have a query. Yesterday we have seen the PowerShell, the property study as a numeric number, but here we can in the portal where we can see that in a numeric way.
I'm sorry. Can you come again, please? I didn't get your question.
Yesterday we have seen through the PowerShell, right? The property study
Mm-hmm.
we have seen that we have run a command regarding. We have another one command we can see the property study, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can we see the same in the portal? Azure portal.
When you say property ID, I did not get what PowerShell did we run yesterday? I'm sorry, I don't really recollect. What is the PowerShell that we ran yesterday?
Uh, and I think, okay.
See, the only PowerShell that I ran yesterday is something known as resolve-DNS. I wanted to resolve the name of this particular storage account out here. So I took the name of this particular storage account, or I took the name of this particular storage account out here, and I was just looking at the IP address of this particular storage account. So that's the only PowerShell script that I ran. But you cannot check that IP address here on the portal. You cannot do that. You will have to use a PowerShell or some kind of a browser tool to kind of do that out here.
Okay.
Okay. Under a particular subnet, how can you create multiple storages? So if I go back into my template, I'll remove this out. I'll only go with one subnet right now, and I will say concat parameter storage account name, comma copy index, and I'll go ahead give my copy function out here. And I say I want, let's say, somewhere around 3, and this is why concat is the right way to write it down. And I will say the count or the name of this particular is copy loop, and I'll, let's say, go ahead give a count of somewhere like 3. So I now will have 3 different storage accounts created in the same subnet. So I can just add that particular concat, do a parameters, do a copy index out here, and then go ahead and create this out. So you can have multiple storage accounts that are, let's say, within the same subnet with the same properties out here. Again, if you want different properties, then the concept kind of changes out. You'll have to do an advanced copy loop out here, but the underlying concept remains the same. Yes, any more questions here? Anyone, any more questions here?
Kiran, VS Code, if you type IAM hyphen storage, I'm not able to
Mhm.
see blob container template, but in your VS Code, I'm able to see.
So yes, if I do an ARM slash and then go with this ARM forward slash storage, this is called storage blob container. Do you not see this one? It should normally have, like, there is no version change in my template creation out there. So when you say ARM hyphen storage, do you don't see the blob container out here?
Yes, Kiran.
Okay, can you please send me the screenshot, because I'm not too sure on why you're not able to see that, but I'll have to check why it is not that way as such.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Yes, any more questions? Yes.
Uh, Kiran,
Uh, just a second. Sorry. Just a second. I was just taking a question offline. So, how to change addresses in IV? Again, when you say subnets, you're not giving the IP address. You're giving the address prefix, or you're giving, let's say, something known as a CID or address block. That's it. So, if I want to create a subnet 3, I'll copy the block. I'll paste this here. I'll say dot 2, and this is subnet 3. So I can have multiple subnets out here like this. Yes, someone online had a question. I'm sorry.
Kiran, can I know the reason why the Microsoft will block the 5 results for sub IDs, subnet IDs?
Uh, I'm, I'm sorry. Can you come again, please? Why Microsoft?
Will reserve the 5 subnet IDs. After creating the subnet
Hmm.
ID, we can see that the 5
Hmm.
was reserved. We see
Correct.
the
So if you look at that again, why Microsoft reserves, or why Azure reserves subnets or subnet IDs? First 4 IPs or first 5 IPs out here. See, there are a lot of things out here called communication broadcasting, network address communication broadcasting, and also for future purposes. So there are 3 IDs that are reserved for something known as future purposes out here, meaning if Microsoft wants to roll out an update into your account, they need some kind of an addresses There is something called communication broadcasting, meaning if you are inside a subnet, there is something called a data packet transfer inside a subnet. You meaning the data will be, let's say, the data will be transferred inside the subnet and outside the subnet and all these things, for which it needs an address, and then your actual IP address that gets you. So default gateway address and all that stuff. Not only Microsoft, you take any cloud provider, it goes ahead and reserves out those 5 IDs out there. This is the standard convention that goes through the entire industry as such. Again, if you want to read about this, just go through this one on why the 5 reservations are done, and you can get this particular documentation as such. Yes, does it answer your question?
Yes, Kiran.
All right, so with that, I'll close the session here today, guys. Please try this out. Try creating this particular block. Try experimenting out with that. See how you can create multiple subnets, how you can create multiple storages, that and all that stuff. And write back to me if you have any questions with this. Okay. And from tomorrow, we'll start with something called virtual machines. We'll go into something known as virtual machines, the concept of virtual machines and all these things. Okay. Thanks, guys, and have a good day ahead. Thank you.